How can a single $500 drone erase $500 million in military power? Like it was nothing. On Russia's southern front, the answer arrived in a strike so fast most defenders didn't even understand what was happening until the fireball was already climbing into the sky. In just 94 seconds, a carefully planned Ukrainian operation detonated roughly 2 million pounds of ammunition, killed 6 elite Russian infantrymen, and ripped out the logistical backbone Moscow needed for its next move, just days before a critical peace summit. Subscribe now, because the way they pulled this off is unreal. At 4 a.m. local time, the operation began, quiet, controlled, and already irreversible. The target wasn't a trench line or a single armored vehicle. It was the Mariupol depot, a warehouse complex that functioned like a heart pumping blood through Russia's southern front. On paper, it was just storage. In reality, it was the primary logistical artery feeding the Zaporizhia corridor and Crimea, supplying up to 50% of the small arms ammo, artillery shells, and rocket munitions used across that entire sector. And Ukrainian intelligence uncovered the real danger. This wasn't routine resupply. Russia wasn't stocking it to keep going. Russia was stocking it to break through. A major offensive staged to punch a hole in Ukrainian lines and change the war's tempo overnight. Timing was everything. This stockpile wasn't just about firepower, it was about leverage. A two-nation peace summit was approaching, and Moscow wanted to walk into it with momentum. Stronger positions, louder artillery, and a credible threat of escalation. If Russian forces launched the offensive first, every negotiation would tilt in their favor. So Ukraine flipped the logic. If the Mariupol depot vanished right before the summit, Russia wouldn't gain leverage. Russia would lose it. Not in weeks, not gradually, instantly. No ammunition means no sustained bombardment. No rockets means no pressure. And thousands of troops on the southern front would suddenly be operating on a shrinking supply clock, forced to ration, delay, or retreat. Russia didn't protect Mariupol like an ordinary warehouse. It was guarded like a strategic vault. First layer, the Panzer S-1, SA-22 Greyhound, a multi-million-dollar air defense system built to swat aircraft and missiles out of the sky. Radar searching, missiles ready, cannons that could carve anything flying too close. Second layer, Zu-23 2 anti-aircraft guns, rapid-fire, close-range defense. If something slipped past the Panzer, these were meant to shred it in the final seconds. Third layer, electronic warfare, the Borisglebsk 2 system. Its job was simple: detect drones, jam control links, and erase UAVs from the sky by cutting the cord between pilot and machine. With kinetic defense and electronic defense stacked together, Russian commanders believed Mariupol was untouchable. They assumed the only way to crack it would be overwhelming force, a swarm too big to stop. Ukraine didn't bring overwhelming force. Ukraine brought a scalpel. This strike wasn't luck. It wasn't a 1 in a million shot. It was the final move in a 12-day intelligence and planning campaign run by Ukraine's main intelligence directorate. Step 1, overhead mapping. High-resolution satellite imagery, like the kind provided by Maxar, gave planners a clean view of the depot layout, access roads, guard positions, and patterns of vehicle movement. Step 2, signals intelligence. A LEA-100 unmanned aircraft flew at around 6,500 feet, collecting emissions. SIGINT, mapping the electronic fingerprint of Russian air defenses and jammers. It drew the depot's protective bubble like a blueprint, where the Panzer searched, where the EW system screamed, where coverage was thick, and where it thinned. Step 3, human intelligence. Local partisan networks tracked deliveries and watched the tempo increase. Their reports confirmed what mattered most: the presence of roughly 2 million pounds of ammunition designated for an upcoming offensive. Ukraine didn't just know the target, Ukraine knew the rhythm of the target, and the tool that would defeat this fortress wasn't a cruise missile or a stealth aircraft. It was a small FPV drone, commercial style, likely a hybrid 3D printed Reboth model worth about $500. That number matters because it explains the mindset shift in modern war. When a weapon is cheap, you can design operations that don't depend on rarity. You can take risks, you can iterate, you can fail and try again. But Ukraine didn't plan to fail. They planned to make jamming irrelevant. With the target mapped and the defenses understood, Ukrainian planners launched a deception campaign designed to pull Russian attention and manpower away from the real threat. They broadcast fabricated radio communications on frequencies known to be monitored by Russian intelligence. The message was deliberate. Ukraine was supposedly preparing a major ground assault near Kherson, roughly 100 miles west of Mariupol. Moscow took the bait. Elite elements were repositioned, including a team of 6 naval infantrymen and a specialized Akhmet Vostok UAV squad. They were moved toward Mariupol because it was considered a secure rear location, a place where professionals could regroup while the main threat developed elsewhere. That decision would become fatal because Ukraine wasn't just attacking a warehouse. Ukraine was setting a trap for the people Moscow trusted most. The operation almost hit an early wall. An initial attempt to monitor a specific target truck through Russian CCTV systems failed. Blocked by cyber defenses, no hesitation. Immediate pivot. Ukraine switched to a backup plan. A Starlink uplink receiving real-time coordinates from partisans stationed roughly 2 miles from the depot. That meant live confirmation, vehicle movements, timing, and final placement without relying on compromised digital access. If the target truck moved, Ukraine would know. If it stopped, Ukraine would know. And when it parked exactly where intelligence predicted, Ukraine would strike. The Ryboth drone launched carrying a 10-pound warhead, but its real weapon was the link. As it flew, it unspooled a fiber optic tether, creating a physical control connection that electronic warfare couldn't jam. No radio link to cut, no signal to scramble, just a cable and a live feed. Then the weather tried to ruin everything. A sudden 20 miles per hour crosswind hit the route. Operators in Kyiv recalibrated guidance on the fly. The drone's rotors made thousands of micro adjustments per second, while the human pilot manually corrected the lateral drift, forcing the drone to hold a direct line like it was riding rails. For about 30 seconds, the entire operation balanced on a 3-way synchronization: human skill, AI assistance, and unpredictable wind. Now the misdirection started. Ukraine launched 5 cheap decoy drones, each programmed to broadcast electronic signatures that mimicked a much larger swarm. On Russian screens, it didn't look like 5 drones. It looked like a wave. The Pantsir S1 reacted instantly, exactly as Ukraine hoped. It engaged the fake targets and fired 57 E-6 missiles, each costing roughly $60,000. In seconds, Russia burned around $360,000 trying to kill ghosts. While Russian air defense crews focused on the loud, obvious threat, the real drone stayed low, around 130 feet, slipping beneath attention, moving like a shadow under a spotlight pointed the wrong way. The Borisogledsk 2 electronic warfare system detected the drone's optical signature, but it couldn't jam what it couldn't reach. The fiber optic tether made the control link effectively unjammable. Still, the operator didn't take chances. He switched the drone into full dark mode, cutting any remaining radio frequency emissions and relying entirely on the physical cable. Wind gusts kept pushing, but he stabilized the drone and waited for the final confirmation from the partisan team. Target area clear. Russian attention still locked on the decoys. Everything was set, and the most important piece on the board was finally moving into place. Through the Ryboth's high-resolution fiber optic feed, the operator watched the target truck approach. Inside were the 6 naval infantrymen and the Akhmet Vostok UAV team, exactly the kind of personnel Russia couldn't afford to lose. The truck rolled forward, slowed, and stopped right where intelligence predicted, directly in front of the warehouse doors. At that moment, Russian air defense remained focused on decoys miles away. The depot was exposed, the truck was exposed, and the real threat was hovering above the center of gravity. Then everything started going wrong, fast. A Russian FPV patrol drone picked up the Ryboth's thermal signature about 2 miles from the target. The Borisogledsk 2 intensified jamming efforts, trying to suffocate any signal it could find. But the bigger problem wasn't the jammer, it was the cable. The Ryboth's thin fiber optic tether snagged on a power pole, jerking the drone and threatening to rip control away at the worst possible moment. And then, like the battlefield decided to add chaos for free, a panicked Russian crew fired a grad rocket nearby. The explosion's shockwave rolled through the air and destabilized the drone again, pulling the tether tighter, vibrating it like a guitar string about to snap. One mistake now, and 12 days of planning would die on a power line. The operator reacted instantly. Instead of fighting the snag, the operator used it. He treated the stuck cable like a pivot point, swinging the drone in a tight arc and slipping it behind a warehouse wall, breaking the enemy's line of sight at the exact moment the Russian patrol drone tried to close in. At the same time, a command went out through Starlink. The partisan team was told to laser illuminate a secondary decoy, a fake target positioned just far enough away to look urgent. The Russian FPV patrol snapped toward the laser spot like a dog chasing a thrown object, dragged off the real drone's trail. For a few seconds, control was restored. The tether stopped screaming. The Ryboth stabilized in the wind, and the operator recentered the crosshair on what mattered, the truck. But the danger wasn't gone. The patrol drone was still in the area, closing again, now within 500 feet. The fiber optic line was stretched almost to its limit. This was the last clean window. With the patrol closing and the tether pulled tight, the operator committed. The drone accelerated to about 37 miles per hour, staying low and using a ruined building as cover, just enough broken concrete to hide its approach for a few more seconds. Partisans confirmed the same crucial detail. Russian units in the vicinity were still focused on the decoys, air defenses still hunting the wrong targets. The Reboth didn't hesitate. It surged out from cover and dove straight toward the truck's front end. Impact point, engine block. The drone slammed in, hard, like a hammer swung by a wire, and the moment it hit, the shaped charge initiated. The 10-pound shaped charge ripped into the truck, igniting the fuel tank in an instant. That alone was lethal, but the truck wasn't the real target. The real target was behind it. The burning vehicle became the match, and the depot's stockpile became the powder keg. Flames punched into the warehouse doors and reached what Russia had spent months building, roughly 2 million pounds of ammunition stacked and staged for the upcoming offensive. The detonation that followed wasn't a single boom. It was a catastrophic release of thermal and kinetic energy, a blast wave that seemed to compress the world for a moment and then throw it outward. Exact overpressure, peak temperature, and crater depth are unconfirmed, but the result was obvious. The depot was being torn apart from the inside. Secondary explosions, likely from stored rockets and grad munitions, continued for minutes, rattling the region like rolling thunder. By the time Russian emergency services arrived, Mariupol wasn't damaged, it was gone. Strategically, the strike severed a critical logistics corridor between Crimea and Zaporizhia, disrupting the supply chain feeding an estimated 10,000 troops on the southern front. Operationally, it erased roughly 3 weeks of critical ammunition that forced Russian planners into a hard reset, delay offensive timelines, reroute supplies, and reduce artillery tempo because you can't fire what you don't have. Financially, the headline was humiliating. A $500 drone neutralized what analysts estimated as a $500 million strategic asset, a return that feels almost fictional. But the real loss wasn't money, it was momentum. It was leverage days before a summit, and it was the sudden realization that secure rear areas no longer exist. This wasn't a lucky shot, it was a system, multiple layers stacked the way Russia stacked defenses. Ukraine integrated HUMINT from partisans, commercial satellite mapping, airborne SIGINT emissions analysis, and live Starlink targeting into one coherent kill chain. And every step had redundancy. CCTV access failed. Pivot to partisan coordinates. Wind hits the approach. AI plus human corrections. Decoys get engaged. The real drone stays low and silent. Patrol drone appears. Laser mark a secondary decoy and pull the threat away. Cable snags? Use it as a pivot instead of panicking. That's the key. The plan wasn't rigid, it was flexible, built to survive friction. For analysts, it's a case study in how low-cost, high-impact tools become devastating when they're guided by real-time intelligence and human decision-making under pressure. Mariupol proves a modern rule that keeps getting confirmed. Fortresses don't fall to bigger fortresses anymore. They fall to integration, intelligence, deception, and precision working as one. It also proves the power of perception management. By simulating an attack elsewhere, Ukraine didn't just distract radars, it lured elite troops into the blast radius, turning a depot strike into a personnel strike too. And most importantly, you can spend millions on missiles and jammers, and still lose to a cheap drone if the enemy understands your system better than you do. In 94 seconds, a $500 FPV drone turned a secure rear depot into a cratered ruin, taking ammunition, elite units, and Russia's offensive timeline with it. This wasn't just destruction, it was a message. The battlefield has changed, and the cheapest weapon can be the sharpest blade. And somewhere right now, another drone is spooling its tether, heading for the next untouchable target.